Hello and welcome. My name is Mason I.B. West. I'm going to be your instructor for Module 1 for Behavior Mastery Challenge. I'm so excited to have you in this class. Like I said, this is the Behavior Mastery Challenge, and I can assure you that you are in for a treat. I'll tell you a story. As a child grows up in a family, sometimes you find yourself in a family where they don't function, they cannot read, they are not their best. Peak performance is impossible if the environment is noisy. If you grow up in that kind of family, what you will notice is that everybody in that family believes that they can't read, they can't function if the environment is noisy. And that's how everybody grows. They do not realize that not being able to function in a noisy environment may not be everybody's thing. Oftentimes, it may be the thing of the head of the house, it may be the thing of the woman of the house, the wife, but it may not be everybody's thing because everybody actually is wired differently. And so it is so until even the child believes this until they migrate to a new environment. Let's say one thing leads to the other, and the child is sent to live with an uncle who has a factory. He lives within the factory premises, and there is a 24-hour exposure to noise, such that this noisy environment becomes the new normal. Two things are likely to happen. Either that this child will become shut down completely and incapacitated because he has been made to believe that he or she is not wired to function and excel in a noisy environment. Yet for another child, it might also be an opportunity where they are compelled by the environment to activate their other dormant capabilities, and then reading and functioning in a noisy environment will become their new normal. At the end, they will now realize that they can function whether the environment is noisy or whether the environment is not noisy, and then they will now find out in which of these two environments they function the best. The advantage they have is that even when they have found out that I function better in a noisy environment, it has introduced them to a new experience where they can function on both sides, whatever the situation they find themselves. Now, this is profound, and if you ask me, it reveals the power, the flexibility, the adaptability, the fact that the human mind is reprogrammable. The human mind is pliable. The human mind is adjustable. The human mind can be tailored to meet any need, any trend, any demand, any situation. This is critical for this conversation. The next example or story I want to share with you is the fact that there is a biblical story about Jacob when he ran away from his family, Esau in particular, his elder brother, and went to stay with an uncle by name Laban. After serving Laban for quite a while, Laban was cheating on him, messing with him and changing figures. So he got to the point of frustration where in his prayers, an angel had to appear to him, and in a dream, the angel educated him on how to choose the skin colors of his flocks. At this time, he had literally left working with Laban and was good to go. But Laban learned by divination that his entire empire, his success had been based on the excellence, the skill set, and the favor of God on the life of this young man. And so he was not going to let Jacob go at all. And so he ran after Jacob and had made Jacob, compelled Jacob to accept to work with him on percentage basis, this time not on salary basis, because he kept changing the wages of the young guy. And so this angel showed up in the 9th season and exposed to Jacob just exactly what to do, because the understanding Laban had with Jacob was that henceforth every cattle that has dotted whatever design on its body belonged to Joseph, and any cattle that is plain white belonged to the boss. And so the angel came and showed Jacob just exactly what to do to make sure that every cattle that is born going forward is dotted. And the angel told him, take your cattle to the stream. When they are about to mate, just before they mate, whatever is the design you want the skin of the offspring to look like, create that design on the stream of water, whatever. Make sure the cattle are looking at the design while they mate. Whatever exposure they get, based on what they are looking at, what they are seeing, it will reflect on their offspring. And so if you want them dotted and designed, create that design for them to look at the power of vision. It will reproduce in their offspring. And then it did that, and it happened that when Laban saw that all the sheep or cattle that were coming out were spotted, he said, okay, I don't want them spotted no more. I don't want them plain no more. Now I want them spotted. Jacob maintained the same strategy. This time he created a plain design while the cattle were mating. And so when the offsprings came out, they were all plain. Profound, strategy. What we learn from that strategy is that whatever the human eyes can see, whatever, and don't forget, the mind is described as eyes in the Bible. It calls it the eyes of your understanding. The truth about vision and sight is that the physical eyes is just one of the agency through which the human mind sees. The eyes is not the faculty for seeing. It is actually one of the faculties for seeing. We see with our mind. The eyes is one of the channels through which the mind sees. That is why if you can see with your mind, it doesn't matter whether your eyes can see. One of the lessons we learn from this is that whatever the mind is exposed to, it reproduces. Whatever the mind is exposed to controls human action, controls human thought, controls human behavior. The mind, therefore, is the key for reprogramming and recalibrating human lifestyle, human outcomes in all ramifications. Now, to take you on in this session, there are certain key fundamentals that I want you to take note of. Number one, about addictions, there are two critical factors. One, that with an addiction, you will never reach full potential. The reasons are simple. Addictions are lifestyles, behaviors, things you do that even when you find out that they are dangerous, they are limiting you, they are stopping you, they are hindering you, they can even cut short your life. You can't even stop them if you want to. You said 1,000 times you're not going to do them no more, but you still see yourself helplessly getting involved in them. They've made you lose opportunities. They've made certain doors close against you, but you're helpless. That's why I said addictions will hinder you reaching your full potential, peak performance, being all that you're created to be. The second thing you want to know about addictions is that even when addictions allow you reach your goals, oftentimes it will allow you. But it only allows you reach your goal just long enough before it strikes and messes up everything you've achieved. And then those lifestyles, a lot of things you've done in secret, a lot of things, impact it now has on your body, a lot of people you've stepped on their toes, you've abused, you've messed up, and then now you have become successful, you've become popular. It is that time, impact of your addiction, its impact on your body, sickness and diseases. Now you have succeeded, you want to live long enough to enjoy it, and you're dying already. Now you've succeeded, and then information spills, you become popular. People you've messed with in the past now notice your popularity, step out and come up against you, and everything you built for 10, for 2, 3, 4 decades are going down the drain. Addiction will mess with your reaching full potential. Other times it just allows you to reach full potential, then it messes up everything. You don't want to do that. The next thing you want to know about addiction is that there are certain factors that are critical for achieving any goal or dream in life. These factors are so powerful that with them in place, impossible becomes a myth. Impossible does not exist. There are two things. Number one, your choices. In life, once you choose what you want and what you don't want, life is compelled. Life does not have an option than to accommodate your choices, than to make your choice happen. Everything in life becomes mobilized to your advantage, to ensuring that that choice is brought to pass. That's how powerful your choices are. You cannot stop a man that has made up his mind. You cannot. You can only help him. You can only support him. You can only go behind to get him to do what it is. Life is choice driven. And so you must make some choices. Number two, your commitment to the choices that you have made. Profound. Now, it's one thing to make a choice, then it's another thing to be committed, to put everything on the table, to put everything on the line to get that choice to come to reality. If you can do these two things, nothing is impossible for you to achieve. And so one of the choices you want to make today is about lifestyles and addictions. Two choices. Number one, you want to choose never again to be enslaved by anybody or by anything. You see that choice? Nobody can make those choices for you. And once you make that choice, nothing can enslave you. You're created in the image of God. Nobody created in the image of God was designed to be enslaved. No, not by his fellow human being, not by anything created by the same creator that created him. Nothing is permitted to enslave you. But they will, if you allow them, if you do not make the choice that they will not enslave you. Number two is that you must choose to believe that you have the power to create anything or to change anything. Because the truth is you have the power. But if you don't believe you have the power, what difference does it make? You must make that choice. And as soon as you make these two choices, it will make all the difference. This brings us to a very important conversation. And that conversation has to do with addiction, both as a need and as a coping technique. This is so important. Now, addiction always is a kind of reward system. The reason people remain addicted to whatever it is they're addicted to is because they derive pleasure from that thing, or it helps them to cope with something. So even when it does not necessarily bring pleasure, it helps them to cope with it may be bringing pain, but it helps them to cope with a higher pain. And so they get stuck to it to avoid that higher pain. In dealing with addiction, therefore, it's not enough to tell you to stop the lifestyle, because if there is something making you go there, like pleasure, if there is something keeping you stuck there, like coping with pain, whatever it is, then unless we are not being sincere asking you to stop the addiction, unless we address the pleasure or the pain, it becomes almost impossible to deal with, to overcome, to avoid whatever it is we're addicted to. Therefore, in addressing an addiction, we want to give priority attention to finding out what pleasure is making you get back there, or what pain you are running away from that is making you get there. It's the reason why the exercises for today look the way they look. It's the reason why your responses to those exercises are so critical. And so it's so important that we're able to identify what is the kind of pleasure you are getting from your addiction. Is there another way? Is there some other channel? Is there something else you can do that will give you the same pleasure or a higher pleasure, as long as it doesn't hurt you, it doesn't damage you, it doesn't hinder you from reaching full potential? The next thing, are there things that you are running away from, the real enemies that is making you get stuck to an addictive lifestyle? For some of us, it's fear. Certain things have happened in your past that has introduced fear. It could be the death of a loved one. It could be an accident you were involved in before that has brought a certain kind of fear. Trauma is the word. And so whenever that trauma comes, you want to take alcohol so that it can induce you to sleep or to forget your sorrow. For some of us, it's grief. From the time that loved one died, under strange circumstances, you have come under some kind of a spell that you need drugs to forget your sorrow. For some of us, it is betrayal. We've been through grievous, terrible relationships that have messed with our self-esteem, our value for ourselves. Certain kind of betrayal that have brought insecurities. For some of us, we are battling with insecurities from our financial shortcomings, from several failures in relationships, from a lot of things that are not just going our way. All our friends are doing exceptionally well, and we think something is fundamentally wrong with us. And that has led us into all kinds of sexual activity and depravity. That has led us into prostitution. For some of us, we have failed again and again. For some people, it could be as simple as writing an exam and failing over and over again. For some people, they are dealing with loneliness. They can't stand being alone. Once they are in a season in their lives, they are not in any relationship, they are not dating, they don't have a friend or something, then it leads to stuff. For some, it's poverty. Everybody you see on earth today is either running away from something or running to something. And so for some of them, for some of us, we're battling with the trauma of not doing well financially. For some of us, we are dealing with low self-esteem. For others, there is this emptiness, this lack of fulfillment. Life is not making sense. You can't find meaning in life. This emptiness that only God can feel. And a lot of us do not realize that it is our body, our life craving for God. And instead of looking for God, we begin to crave other things to fill in that gap, and yet that vacuum has not been filled because the right thing to fill that vacuum has not been introduced into that vacuum. For a lot of us, I may not have mentioned your case, but there is something in your past or in your present that you are battling with that is making you go back to drugs, making you go back to a sexual lifestyle that is incredible, negatively incredible. I'm saying that if we are going to deal with your addiction and deal with it, then we need to identify what these things are. We need to get rid of them. Unless we identify the real enemy, unless we eliminate the real enemy, then we're not able to come to the place of victory. It is the reason why this model is going to dig into your case history, is going to help us with addiction identification through the addiction drill. It's going to do a lot of needs assessment. It's going to help us focus on this model is to identify our triggers and put them all where they belong. This brings us to the logic of an addiction. Unless you understand the logic of an addiction, you cannot conquer an addiction. I believe, therefore, that in dealing with addictions, in dealing with compulsions, what we do is that we must start by identifying what it is that we are dealing with. A lot of us don't even know what we're dealing with. Most times, we think that we're dealing with one addiction, whereas we have more than one providing support and life to the other. Most times, there is an addictive lifestyle that is more visible, more in public view. That's the one we declare. That's the one we think is our problem. But more often than not, there is something else giving it the life, fueling it. And unless we are able to identify it, we're not able to deal with it. To be holistic, to be thorough, dealing with addictions and compulsions requires that we understand this logic of an addiction. And the logic is simple. An addiction does not and cannot stand alone. The logic is simple. Addictions are never known to be loners. They are very polygamous in nature. They are very symbiotic in configuration. That's the logic. And so if you will conquer an addictive lifestyle, you must identify not just the addictive or compulsive action that you engage in. You have to be able to identify the triggers. You must be able to identify the support system that is providing a life wire, a support, fueling it. If you don't do this, what happens is that when you think you have identified the problem, when you think you have dealt with and conquered it, all of a sudden, it bounces back. The reason is simple. You cannot kill an action whose trigger is still subsistent, and then you claim that you've done the job. It's like somebody who is addicted to, pornography. And then you claim that you've dealt with pornography, and yet you've not addressed the person's access to gadgets, to systems, to the internet. These are the things that are fueling pornography. You've not identified the kind of friends they keep, the places they go, the things they do there. These are the things that are fueling pornography. You have not been able to identify if there are things they take when they go to those places that puts them in a mood. You've not identified if there are the kind of music, the kind of pictures, the kind of whatever. You can't deal with this until and it's not the same for any two people. There is no one size fits all for everybody. There has to be a way of identifying each person's trigger and dealing with it. Otherwise, you don't get the victory. You get frustrated halfway. This is so important. Now, this brings us to the main focus of this model, the human mind, and how it relates with addiction, understanding the mind. As soon as we understand the way the human mind functions, there is a sense in which we understand why we act the way that we do. Remember the stories I shared with you about the child who always thought that it cannot function in a noisy environment, only to be exposed to another environment unavoidably, and then discovers that it really can function in a noisy environment, and sometimes a noisy environment is even the best place for it to reach its peak. Or is it the story about Jacob and the cattle whom, as soon as they were exposed to a kind of pictures, impressions, it reflected in their products, their offsprings? This is so important. The human mind at birth, it comes as a clean slate, empty but at least open. Nothing inside. The human mind comes unspoiled, pure, uncorrupted, and unstained. As soon as birth, the mind begins to take the shape of its immediate environment. This is so important. The mind is so pliable, it adjusts and conforms to its environment. That is why most of what we call our preferences are merely products of our first exposure. And if the mind can adjust to its first exposure, it can adjust to its second, and then third, and then fourth. In fact, all we need to do to control the mind is to control its exposure. If we do that, we can change anything we want to do. Just keep it at the back of your mind that the human mind is very photographic and capable of reproducing whatever it is exposed to. That is why it is also capable of unlearning whatever it has learned, whatever it has been exposed to. And so at birth, the human mind is very impressionable, very easy to adapt. However, as soon as it has gathered all those impressions together, it becomes fixed. It is what we call mindset. It becomes set in a particular mold, which most of us claim to be our preferences. But the truth is that that's just what we were exposed to the first time. The truth also is that as soon as the mind becomes set, to unset the mind becomes difficult, but not impossible. This is so profound. So, almost all of the times, an addiction is the way the mind becomes set as a result of an exposure. If we are going to be able to deal with any particular lifestyle, then there has to be a reprogramming, if you like, a re-exposure of the mind. This reprogramming of the mind is what behavior mastery is all about. Take your mind, give it a new exposure that begins to impact on how the mind controls the body, and everything changes. This is so important. So all this pathological fixation on our cravings that have taken over our lives, and we have become completely helplessly powerless, that we have come to the ridiculous conclusions It's my choice. That is how I was born. It's not true. It's a lie. That's not how you were born. It really is not your choice. It was the choice of your first exposure. It was the choice of the people who had the opportunity to take care of you and where they let you go, what they let you do. Once you accept these things as your choice or as how you were born, it's defeatist. You're just surrendering your will, surrendering your power. As a matter of fact, it's our way of hiding our defeat and succumbing to the overwhelm of this exposure. For most of us, inside of us, we don't like it, we don't want it. Therefore, even though it has been said that most adult behavior is the result of childhood exposure, one of the true marks, proofs that you are now an adult, is that you have the ability to brace up, to take responsibility for your actions, your slavery, and your addiction. You can no longer claim or hide under childhood exposures. So you want to ask yourself, is this really what I want? Or am I just succumbing to other people's templates and other people's conditioning? If this is not what I want, then put on your seatbelt, brace up, get ready to follow me on this journey as we re-expose our minds to the kind of information that will reflect and give birth to the kind of behavior that we want. Your life can never be the same again. This brings us to the end of Module 1. Make sure to do your behavior exercises, and I'll see you in Module 2.